Okay, this is a bit of a combination of Bitcoin news and mass adoption. The next 3 videos I make regarding Bitcoin news are some of the largest news stories related to mass adoption, and you're not going to want to miss these, especially the third one. So today we'll start with number 1, then I'll get number 2 and number 3 out in subsequent days. But check this out. I believe this is a sign of things to come. This is the Philippines. And I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to cover this news story a little bit, and then I'm going to talk to you about the pros and cons and what we need to look out for in European countries and North American countries as well in the future. I think this may be a sign of potential things to come. So Philippine regulators plan to legalize cryptocurrencies and classify as securities. So first of all, let me start with the positive. This is a good thing in a lot of ways. It's going to be a far easier path for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies to go mainstream and mass adoption if they go through some government regulation. It's going to take some sort of government regulation put it this way. You are living in another world if you think that large corporations are willing to fight against government regulation. Most large corporations Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies use government regulations to their advantage to stop competitors in their industry as a barrier of entry. I mean, it's kind of hard to, for example, start a bank today. There's so much regulations. If you understand that business model, a couple of decades or more ago, it was a pretty profitable thing to do. If you ever started a bank, there were whole teams of people and whole companies. Their whole goal was to start small community banks, and then their hope was that these banks would be bought out by the larger banks like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase Bank, etc., Citibank. Once they grew the banks and they showed that they had a profitable local business model. However, in this day and age, it's far more difficult for companies to start banks because of the sheer amount of regulatory hurdles that you have to jump over. So large businesses want regulation. So people say, yeah, but it would be cheaper for businesses. Yes, but the largest businesses want regulations. It prevents competition from smaller competitors. So ideally, large corporations want to see regulation in place before they start, accepting Bitcoin on a mass scale. So when you see things like regulators plan to legalize cryptocurrencies and classify it as a security, well, this does a few things. First of all, the first thing it's going to do is going to create a lot more awareness. People that have never heard of Bitcoin, never paid attention to Bitcoin, are going to pay attention to it now. They're going to hear about it, some of them for the very first time. Also, there are people in the financial services sector that have heard of Bitcoin, but they've said it was a Ponzi scheme or whatever. Anytime someone tells you Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme, it just proves that they fundamentally do not know what they're talking about. They have no idea. They have such an elementary understanding. So those people who said, oh, Bitcoin's, a Ponzi scheme, they're going to start doing research now because their own clients, customers, and institutions are going to be interested in this vehicle, in this product. So therefore, they'll start doing research on it. So anytime you bring about more awareness, you're going to bring about further mass adoption. However, and that's all well and good. And by the way, it's good that they didn't call it a currency and they're looking at legalizing it as a security. That's good in one way because I promise you, mass adoption as a security first is going to be even more difficult. Governments do not want as a currency first is going to be far more difficult. Governments do not want competing currencies ever, ever, ever. So they're classifying it as a security. Now, the negative to this is when they classify it as a security, this starts creating issues with things like initial coin offerings, which some people in the cryptocurrency space would love to see some regulation on that area. Because initial coin offerings, oftentimes when they say that they'll say if it has properties of a security, then it's considered a security. That's what governments have said before. So initial coin offerings, payments on things like master nodes, all of those sort of things consider things like Neo, Bitconnect, all of those master nodes like Dash, Coin, all those sort of where you can get kind of payouts sometimes can be considered dividends or cash-like dividends when it's considered a security, and that can create further regulatory issues. And it can make it very difficult for example, I could see a time when if you weren't careful under this regulation that we could see an issue with masternodes, which many new cryptocurrencies are converting. Even Ethereum is slowly converting to a proof of stake concept, which means that by their very nature, you have to have master nodes. So in that way, these are some of the negatives that we have to deal with. But the Philippines is a small country. I believe that it's interesting to watch to see how this stuff develops, to give us a clue of how it may develop down the road in the future for our own currencies, for our own, our own countries, and how they're going to regulate or how they're going to attempt to deal with things like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So it's very fascinating for now. I tend to have feel more positive about this than negative. And here's the final thing that you're going to see people in this space dislike. People do not like that cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. There are people out there that don't want to see any of it getting centralized. By the very nature, Bitcoin is a decentralized product. But when you start when you start seeing governments regulate it and try to treat it a certain way, then a lot of people feel like they're manipulating it, they're affecting it, and in some level, this is some sort of centralization attempting to take place. And I believe that that's a fair argument to be made. And in a perfect world, I would like to see things totally decentralized. However, I don't know if that's possible, without a worldwide economic governmental collapse. And I don't necessarily see that happening anytime soon at all. So thanks for watching. This is a great story. Stay tuned for the next two videos I'm going to be putting up. Number 3 is going to be probably the best. Number 2 is going to be a story that I think is much more powerful than even this one. Number 3 is going to be by far the best story when we talk about mass adoption in the cryptocurrency space. Thank you for watching. This is a fresh story out. It's only about 15 hours old as of this video. Click that subscribe button, hit that bell notification icon so you'll get notified as soon as I put out another story. By the way, I would love to hear what you think about this story, mass adoption, as well as the next 2 stories coming out. So stay tuned, make a note down below, leave me a comment, let me know what you think. I would love to get your feedback. Thank you for watching.